Hi, I'm April Watkins. This is my husband, Steve Watkins.
And we met back in high school. We got married in 1991. We have 4 children. Our oldest, Jessie, was born in 91.
And then our twins were born in 96. And then our youngest son was born in 98. In 96, when we found out that we were having twins, everything was going relatively good. And then a few months into my pregnancy, I started having problems, got preeclampsia, and I was hospitalized for 3 months prior to having our first twin, Seth. He was premature. He was 4 months premature. And he weighed 1 pound, 4 ounces. And then a month later, I was still in the hospital. A month later, I had our daughter, Elizabeth, at UC Davis. And she was in the NICU for almost 4 months. And she was 3 months premature. And when I was able to go in there with Elizabeth after she was born and spending time with her as much as I could also, her nurse, Diana, she was wonderful. She used to always call our daughter Elizabeth Thumbelina. But Diana started doing the kangaroo, where she would put Elizabeth on my chest, even with all of her tubes and everything. And Diana helped us out a lot. She took, really good care of Elizabeth and all the other children in there too.
I always wanted to be a photographer. I got my first camera when I was 10 and just fell in love with it. Did black and white photos, pictures of my family all the time. Took photography in high school, learned darkroom stuff. Was going to go to the art institute of Pittsburgh and I got talked out of it. My dad is a salesman. He's like, photographers are a dime a dozen. You're never going to get a job as a photographer. Don't even bother. So after a lot of people said that, including my teacher, I kind of thought being an EMT or a firefighter seemed cool, so I did that. And then realized it was very low paying. So I decided to go into nursing. Working at UC Davis Medical Center, trauma unit, and other places in the hospital. Then I eventually transitioned into the neonatal ICU, NICU, and found out that was my calling. I really, really loved it. I really working with the little preemies and the parents, and found it very, very fulfilling. And so I worked there my last 7 years as a nurse. I just really loved working with the little preemies and the babies and watching them grow and then going home and, even we'd have neonatal reunions every year and come back and see, these little tiny babies this big, now they're up running around, with balloons and playing. So that's really fulfilling. You really can see what you're doing and making a difference. But I still always loved photography. I did it on the side. I started taking night classes just for fun, and then started going to Sac City for photography, taking all their photography courses, and doing black and white. I was doing tons of black and white printing, and I met these parents, the Watkins, and really clicked with them. And they had one of those little preemies I mentioned, and I said, hey, can I do a picture of her? She was finally getting better. She was able to breathe on her own and so forth. And I set it up with the parents, and they agreed, and we did the photo.
And this is one of the pictures that Diana took.
They're absolutely wonderful photos that she took for us. After months of Elizabeth being in the hospital, we finally got the news in early October of '96 that she'd be able to go home in the next couple of weeks. And we brought her home on October 18th of 1996. And she was home with us until December.
And unfortunately, I got a call one day from April saying Elizabeth had passed away at home. And it was just devastating news to hear. I was really, really sorry to hear it. And April was crying on the phone, and she just kept saying, though, I'm just so glad you did those photographs of her, because that's all we have left. We don't have anything else of her.
The time that we got to spend with her was one of the best times of my life, and then it was also probably one of the worst times of my life when we lost her. And with that being said, it was very special to have the photos that we do have to remember her by, because it was a very short time that we had with her. But when it really comes down to it, and you know, having the photos and how they affected our life afterwards.
And how they still do
and how they
affect
still
us.
do, you know, just by putting them in every house that we've lived in since, and they've always hung on the wall behind the fireplace, and now they hang on the wall in the living room, and how friends come over and ask questions about them because they never met them. How Trent
Knows
wasn't
them.
around when
they
she
were
had
born.
passed away, and he knows them now because they've always been in our house and in his life.
So a couple years after that, I actually ended up retiring from nursing and became a full-time photographer. Meanwhile, the hospital called me a couple times, said we have these little babies here that probably won't make it, so would you mind coming in and doing a few pictures for the parents? And I said, sure. And it just gave me the idea, along with April, you know, how important it was to have pictures. So we just started working actively with UC Davis Medical Center and Sutter. So that kind of just grew, and that's how Little Blessings started. And now I have over 30 volunteer photographers. And when we get calls from the hospital saying that they'd like to have pictures, family portraits of a baby who might not make it, I just send out an email and people respond, and we do the photos for free. There's no charge, and the parents get the now the digital files. Used to be prints. Often I go to back to Sac City College where I took photography and do guest speaking for different instructors there. And this one time several years ago I was doing my speech and talking about photography and how I got into it being a nurse. And I usually have a slideshow. And at the end of the slideshow I have a picture of Elizabeth, little thumb in her mouth. And I talk about you know, giving back to the community and how important it is to volunteer and find something you're passionate about. And when that picture came up, I heard a noise in the back of the room, and it turned out it was someone who was crying. And it was a young woman, and she was crying and choking up, and she said, "Did you take that picture?" And I said, "Well, yes." She said, "But you took that, that's in my house." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "That's my sister." And I said, "No, that can't be right. This family's from Grass Valley, and this is a long time ago." She said, "No, that's my sister from a long time ago." And it turned out it was. And what, you know, a small world. I couldn't believe it. So we became friends, and she learned more about Little Blessings. She said, "Sign me up, I want to do it." And she went to lots of different photo shoots and even volunteered with Mr. and Mrs. Claus in the hospital, taking pictures of the preemies. And I just can't believe that.